This is the unrestricted free agent.
The Jimbo Fisher stuff. Were you in the room the other day when he threw?
Part of the reason we had so much fun being Clemson was because we used to talk a lot of shit to them and they couldn't handle it.
You feel fine, but your hands are shaking.
Coach Spurrier couldn't give a damn.
I want to take these athletes and mentor them.
Why can't the Gamecocks win at the SEC tournament?
So sunny all the time, so hot.
Too sunny.
Too sunny.
Fans are going to be fans, and people who understand the sport are going to talk sports.
With some weird dynamics.
It's going to be painful, but I think at the end of the day, we'll be stronger people for it.
Get stronger today, huh? Tuesday edition. Tim Hill, unrestricted free agent. Thanks for joining us. Glad you're a part of the program. Oh, Landon Powell hitting us up yesterday with all kinds of words of wisdom and some strong thoughts about his future. If you haven't checked that out, certainly would recommend you doing so on the YouTube channel. However, you're joining us on this show, it's much appreciated. Video streaming live every single day, 10 a.m. to noon. On every single Monday through Friday. Let's not hype it up too much, right? YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, the audio live streaming on Podbean, and then the podcast version shoots out all over the place after that. Thanks for being here. Last night, solidifying the College World Series field. We'll get to that in just a second. DC, first one in this morning, 9 a.m. on the dot. We got Roger with a good morning. Anthony, York as well, and Anthony just starts with "In Powell We Trust" with the fist sign there. I don't know if I've ever heard a person in his position be as clear, but even as I say that, I don't know if I've ever known a coach with such a distinct background like him. First of all, let me just feel my age here. I don't know of another coach. Mike Boynton is probably the only other one out there in my career covering the Gamecocks that has now gone on to be a major head coach, where I specifically covered their playing days. And Landon, coming from the very beginning, watching him develop as a player and go to the College World Series 3 times with the Gamecocks, and now winning a national championship with North Greenville, it's certainly making me feel my age for sure. But everything he had to say yesterday about being very clear, he's going to stay at North Greenville. He's very happy there for a lot of reasons outside of the traditional coaching career path, right? He's been to the big leagues. He's made some money. He has played the game at the highest level, and he has his eyes really only set at the University of South Carolina. That's where he would like to coach one day. With that being said, he also mentioned how much he supports Mark Kingston and hopes that he gets that program turned around, and then maybe one day Landon Powell will be the head coach in the University of South Carolina. But it was a very clear, un-PR polished type of discussion that I thought we had, very frank and honest, and I appreciate it, and I don't understand why other coaches can't do it more. And I'm hopeful in the 21st century, in the way that we communicate on this show, in the way that our entire world has evolved in communicating with social media, that maybe we're moving more towards that. On the other end of that spectrum, we had Phil Mickelson in his uncomfortable press conference yesterday at the U.S. Open. We'll certainly get to that. Half of the College World Series field is full of SEC West teams. And let's go ahead and get a college baseball expert in on the program so you don't just have to look and listen at me. We got former Gamecock assistant coach, former Charleston Southern head coach Stuart Lake joining us in almost a witness relocation type of lighting situation today. Yeah, it'll move around. You never know how that goes. And that looks like it is a Jim Toman sponsored Nike Middle Tennessee hat, huh?
Yeah, I'm trying to get my lighting right. But yeah, Coach Tolman and Coach Myers sent me their hat. So I figured since hats have become maybe a little signature, I'd break them out here during the baseball talks for sure.
good-looking lid you got there. Jim Toman, the longtime right-hand man to Ray Tanner at the University of South Carolina. Jerry Myers, the pitching coach as well. Stuart Lake, part of that staff up until 2002, and then returned back with Mark Kingston. So Landon Powell is a guy you're very familiar with. So why don't we start with Landon and where he is right now? I know we tried to get your thoughts on that right after we had him on yesterday. We had some technical issues. So thanks again for joining us today. Again, I'm going to jinx it completely and say, bright and clear. Coming in bright and clear there, Stuart. Even got the lighting fixed now and you're good to go. Okay. What do you think of where Landon is and then how that pertains to Gamecock baseball?
Yeah, no, I was able to listen to you guys yesterday, and obviously as you're always proud of your players so much. So he's a grown man for sure, but I still a lot of times, like we joke as parents, you still see that 18-year-old guy sitting there and just so proud of him. And there's no doubt, as you said in your opening, that was pure honesty from him. There was no, hey, you should say this, you should say that type PR work. And I just think it shows you how we all felt about this program that came through that era. And there certainly felt that way before us. And there's been teams, obviously, in national championship teams, but there's a passion for South Carolina baseball. It's in a lot of us. It was so obvious yesterday. It's still there in Landon. So just super proud of him. And, there definitely will come opportunities for him, no doubt, in the very near future. Whether it is South Carolina or wherever, I think he's just a rising star himself.
Well, there's no doubt about it. You win a national championship on any level, you are a good coach for sure. Yeah. But to do it for the first time ever with the specific challenges at North Greenville, did you hear the recruiting pitch? Hey, you got to go to chapel 2 times a week here. You can't ever have an alcoholic beverage. You can't kiss a girl on campus. The whole thing. They got some specific challenges. That's the PR word that you would use there. Specific challenges there at North Greenville. You got to navigate, and he has done that and then some, and tons of success. And not just this year, Stuart. This has happened now for several years, but just this year, kind of getting to the mountaintop and not even just getting there. Obviously, being on top in D2.
Yeah, and I felt him. It sounded like a lot of our recruiting pitches at Charleston Southern, us both being Baptist schools and honoring what those schools mean, and as coaches you do. But in today's society, sometimes people would look at you funny when you said, hey, no girls in your dorm. And, so it was always – I thought it made me a better coach, and I think it's made Landon, Trey, and those guys better coaches because we've had to really sell ourselves. We had to sell what we do and allow our school to be itself and be proud to work at those schools, and they've done a great job of that. But they've been contenders for the last, I guess, 3-4 years when you look back at it. And, to now finally make that step. And a big deal is what baseball is in their conference. Wingate won it last year. I think they're in the same conference. So to think about having back-to-back national champions out of their conference winning the national championship, that tells you that not only is North Greenville kind of up the ante on baseball, it sounds like their entire conference is doing that. So that was a big deal for them.
Well, the way that works too in D2 is they break it up in regions to get to the College World Series. Everybody understands how dominant the southeast region of our country is when it comes to baseball. So it doesn't surprise me, but that does kind of relate to what Trey was saying he felt like they had to win the College World Series a couple of times just to get to the College World Series, and that was the only place they didn't lose, I think, in this postseason. Didn't lose a single game. A couple of you guys weighing in on this thing so far. Thank you. Double R. Don't turn around, Tim. The jumbo screen at the stadium's on fire. All right, good tip there. Jason weighing in with a good morning as well, and Trey talking about Phil Mickelson's press conference. We'll get to that in a second. So I think from the Gamecock perspective, Stuart, and you've been in the dugout at a couple of different eras. You certainly know Ray Tanner very well. The easy thing from the fan standpoint would be to say, hey, Landon's right there. It hadn't worked out with Mark Kingston. Why not just go there, plug here, move forward? Everything will be great from where you're sitting. Why isn't that happening right now with Gamecock baseball?
Well, I am going to be PR today because I would like to think I'm going to be back in coaching one day. So there's no job open. So that discussion, to be honest with you, from a professional standpoint, that's a hard discussion to have when the job is still occupied. And I, out of respect, will never do that to anyone. But I can guarantee you, if that day comes, and it obviously a day will come in some form that this job will be open, there's no doubt Landon Powell's name will be right at the top of the list. And it should be. So that's kind of my PR Tuesday morning version of that. But I can promise you, as I was saying yesterday, and I kept kind of going in and out, 2 recruits that had meant so much to me and my wife early in our coaching career together. One was Drew Meyer. It was the first commit ever to me as a college coach. And that's why just to this day, he's one of my best friends. Landon Powell was that same kind of person that came into our program, that he just attracted you to him. He just was a guy you wanted to be around, and then obviously took us to a higher level, got to go to 3 World Series he did with our program. So he's a guy that you never have to doubt he's top of my list when things start going on. But honestly, out of respect and professionalism, it's hard to sit and talk when there's still that going on. And I hope you respect that part.
No doubt about it. Trey says, I will say, to hear Landon's comments professionally on Mark Kingston was refreshing. He acknowledged the struggles, didn't waver in expressing confidence in what Kingston is doing. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. The major problem I have with a lot of discussion from where I sit is it's such fluff, and so it's Phil Mickelson press conference stuff yesterday, right? I mean, it was very simple. All Phil had to say, he was asked one time specifically, are you going to be okay if you never play on the PGA Tour again? And you can see it in his face. All he had to do was say, no, that's not okay with me, man. I earned the right to play. I mean, he had said it in a different way, but he knew that would be coming across too strong, or maybe people would ruffle feathers in the whole thing, so he didn't do it, and he kept repeating his BS PR line of, I respect everyone's opinion, and the whole thing, where everyone watching, everyone that has ever spoken as a human being before knows that's total BS. What Landon gave us was truth, right? He gave us truth and honest feelings. Now, in a way, I think he can do that as a Division II head coach, because the fan base isn't a certain level and media people aren't coming at him every which way and turning things around and the whole deal. Stuart, I'm sure you've seen it behind the scenes before, where you'll see a public comment being taken out of context and kind of held against coaches, and it is absolutely unfair, but it is kind of the game that is played. Is that a fair way to put it?
I think it's a fair way to put it, and there's no doubt. And in this, it's so hard to sometimes express. I thought Landon did a great job of actually expressing what you're trying to express. Sometimes we have a hard way of putting those words together without coming off as, either egotistical or insulting the other person, where you're really just trying to do what Landon did yesterday. And I've been there myself. We love this program. And that's what he was expressing yesterday, was just a true love, to me, a true love for this program that so many of us share that have been a part of it.
Well, let me go on the other side of it, having been legacy media nerd and TV guy that has 3 minutes to do a sportscast every single day at 6 and 11. It's not just the fact that it can be difficult to express it. I think most coaches do a really good job of that most of the time. It's just that it takes time. These things aren't they're not black and white. You have to hear someone out to get the full context of what they're saying. And if you're going in a soundbite sportscasty, you got to get people in and out, and their attention span is 20 seconds, and you got to change the story and the whole thing. It's impossible. From personal experience, it is literally impossible. I wanted to put a 3.5 minute clip of Landon talking yesterday about the Clemson and Carolina situation. Well, Twitter only allows 2 minutes and 20 seconds, so I broke them up, right? I mean, that's just an example, and I'm not even restricted to, a typical legacy media type. You have so many words to put in a column. You have so many minutes to do a segment on radio before the commercial hits. You have so many minutes to do a sportscast. So that also plays into it. And from the outside looking in, I understand how that can be so frustrating for guys like you that really know what's going on, that really know the situation, and then see it portrayed. It gets skewed, I guess, in the portrayal of that.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to put it. I mean, you see so many things behind the scene, then the on stage version is so different sometimes than actually what is going on. And believe me, it's always a friend or someone going, "Hey, I won't tell anybody, but what's really going on?" And in today's world, you really can't even share with a lot of people, because a lot of times it's not that they're wanting to tell the secret you've told them. We just can't help it anymore. It's so easy to shoot a quick text to someone and go, "Hey, you won't believe what I just heard," and blah, blah, blah. So it makes a lot of us in situations probably even quieter than we want to be, because you never want to be that person that, gets the name of this is who told us this or told us that.
And how you put that right there, the on-stage version, where we are in the 21st century. I feel like we pulled the curtain back in a lot of ways, or there's just more access behind the curtain, or the whole thing. That is one thing that has frustrated me throughout my career, Stuart, is that you hear things on a podium or when lights are on, and then that ain't the version, right? Any of us who've ever been in a locker room, there is 100% truth in that locker room, and then there are versions of that truth that get out. And I'm hopeful that this show and entities like this show, where you go straight to the internet and it's a long form deal and you can have context in the whole thing, will help kind of just get rid of that. This is the public version. This is the real version. This is the private version. Maybe we can get just more truth out there in the proper way. And that's the tough part, right? To be fair to everybody at the same time, and to have an accurate sense of what's going on. Maybe that's idealistic on my part. I don't know. But that's kind of the goal here. And the on stage, I'm going to take that, Stuart. I'm going to use that many times, a lot like I do with your more knowledge out there, and not necessarily more wisdom type deal, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, you're fine to run with it. And while we're on it, and here's what I want in the media. I want, after games, tell me why this isn't logical. Why can the crew chief not come out and meet with the media? We see so many controversial calls just through the College World Series. I was, as you know, I was a minor league umpire a little bit early in my career, and the crew chief was responsible for any action of that crew. It just still amazes me that at this level of SEC and College World Series, the crew chiefs still don't have to come out and face the media to answer a question, but we're perfectly fine with having an 18-year-old student athlete come out and sit at the podium for as long as the media wants to ask questions. And a lot of coaches always get mad at me when I say that, and they'll go, well, no one will want to umpire then. Go look at what they're making. They won't have a problem with doing it. And that's what so you kind of jumped on your soapbox. This has been my soapbox, is even in the NFL or Major League Baseball, why are we not making them part of the press conference at the end? And occasionally they'll grab a crew chief and he'll give a little, as you said, little, snippet of an answer, and they're fine with it. But I've just looked at so many calls over this world. I mean, I've watched, I feel like 100 games through these regionals and different things. And it's amazing that you never have to come out, but we're fine with having the 18-year-old student athlete come out, and no one ever questions that. I'd love to hear what you saw. When we see it on TV and then they go to video, I think that would even make our production more exciting and go, hey, what were they telling you in the headphones? Why did they say he was safe? Or why did they say they couldn't overturn the call? Kind of a tangent from where you were going, but that one's been sitting on me, and it still amazes me it doesn't happen.
No, you're right. I think everybody is with you. Everybody in the game of baseball is with you, right? If we're upping accountability, or we want to hear reaction, and we want to know post-game thoughts, that's a big part of it. Trey says Michigan getting robbed on that tag at second. Still baffling to me. In the Louisville series he's talking about in the super regional, or the regional, I should say. Craig says umpires should be held responsible. RL says people would never be satisfied with the crew chief's responses to the question. And Trey's going back on that Michigan deal. It was overwhelmingly clear, convincing evidence, an egregious bad call. But that's the thing, RL, and that's where I'm hopeful we can eventually get to. No one is asking for the right answer across. We just want to see that you're a human being, most importantly, I think. You know what? This was the problem with Will Muschamp. It's Nick Saban's philosophy. Shutting things down just creates such a terrible culture in so many ways. Not allowing guys to speak publicly just shows distrust or a dictatorial type attitude towards your program and the media and the whole deal. All you got to do is put your offensive coordinator out there. If your offense stinks, let us see it and feel it through his words, man, and let us know that he knows it stinks, because otherwise it just keeps building and building. I think from a dissatisfaction standpoint, how many times behind the scenes Stewarts have umps on their walk out of a field say, "Whew, that was a rough one, huh, guys? We struggled tonight. That wasn't our best effort." Or also on the flip side of that, how many times do they dap it up and say, "Hey, man, we had a hell of a game. We got them right. There were some tough calls in there, but you guys were on it." That's how I saw it too, in the whole thing. Well, we need to see that publicly too a little bit. I think that would just make us all feel better as baseball fans, just sports fans maybe.
Well, I can tell you right now, video replay for us as coaches made us feel so much better about outcomes, because it just now when you do this and they go meet and they run back and say safe out.
One of the worst gestures in all of sports too, by the way. Yeah. I mean, such a manly game, and then when you want to replay, you just go like this.
I know.
I hate it.
I don't know. I don't know what the other options might be. I agree. That's not I don't see the manliest of men doing that every day. But
it's jazz hands, right? It's baseball.
It could. I guess it could have been way worse. But it did. It made you feel better to at least. And look at it did what they wanted. Ejections are way down, because now, who are you going to argue with? Some phantom guy sitting in Major League Baseball, most of the ejections now are still just a little bit on balls and strikes, and maybe some on when you hit a guy in retaliation. You don't see the arguments you and I grew up watching Bobby Cox and those type guys have anymore. Sometimes I miss those. But my point being, those guys, and if you listen to me this year on the radio, I tried to continually say how good they really are, because you got to think in a normal baseball game, there's 250 pitches. And out of that 250 pitches, we probably, from a dugout, not a fan, but from the dugout, maybe yell on our side for about 4 or 5, and maybe on their side 4 or 5. So let's just say on a bad day, 12 pitches. That's a pretty dang good job when you think about it. But when those plays happen, like in a Michigan game or on this or on that, they just run out and say safe or out, and no explanations ever given on, hey, we all saw the same video. Boy, it sure looked different from our angle. Why in baseball rules, or what angle did you have that we didn't? It was funny in the SEC. A lot of times when you thought you were right and the umpire would come back, and we'd still be yelling, and they'd yell back, "Hey, it wasn't us, it was Birmingham. Yell at them." Well, I just finally one day said, "Well, great. Give me his number. I'll call and yell at him. We just want to know what they told you. We're not yelling at you, but you're our go-between, that phantom person sitting in Birmingham and us right here with the crowd going. Just tell us what they said." That's all we ever were asking. If you didn't make the call, then it should be easy for you to tell us what he said or she said or whoever said. That's all we ever asked when that was going on. And it will improve, I think. But I'm going to keep jumping up on my soapbox that I think in every sport that should be part of the press conference. Coaches, players, and if it's got to be in a different little area where they can't see them or say it, I've always felt that the crew chief should come out as a crew chief and say, here's what we had on that call today. And he can also come out and say, I think we had one of our best games today, or whatever he wants to say. That's his right. But I just always thought that should be part of it.
Yeah, and umps deserve that, to be able to come in after a game. Anybody questions? Nope. All right, we did a great job. It was a good one for us. See ya.
Yeah.
A little stamp of approval, right? Interesting takes here. RL says umpires have no motivation to be held accountable, even at the question of integrity. Now, you giggle. That was an evil giggle if I ever heard one. Yeah. But that's taking it too far, right?
There's umpires. I've got some really good friends that are umpires. That's why I laugh, because they'll say, Stu, why'd you start this? Because I started with them all the time. Every time we'd have just a home midweek game, and I'd always say, like as they're walking by, hey, who's the crew chief? And immediately one guy'd raise his hand, and they knew where I was going. I was like, all right, we'll know who's in charge out here. And so now there's there's a ton of integrity and accountability on it, but it's just something I've always wanted. I think every person has a part of the game they'd love to see a tweak here and a thing there. That's always been mine, and I think it'd be good.
Trey going with I disagree with RL. If they actually explained it, you would at least have an understanding of the conclusion, even if you disagree. And Trey says he wants like a tennis style deal. And that's a lot like the Major League Baseball one, I feel like. But they're able to do it because of the level of technology. It's such an investment in the whole deal. And from a financial aspect, it's too much to ask of college baseball right now, it seems like, in a lot of ways. Troy says, I disagree. Umpires are motivated to get the calls right. And exactly what you said, Stuart, I follow some account. I don't even know which account it is on Twitter that pops up the umpire scorecard behind the plate after Major League Baseball games. And it's incredible to me, the numbers on there. Like the percentage is typically mid 90s of calls that got right. I mean, sometimes higher than that, 97, 98. I saw one the other day, a guy missed one ball or strike the entire game. Entire game, man. 1 out of 250, like you mentioned. That percentage is massively impressive, and we should, as fans, see that as well. I'm glad that information is getting out there in the big leagues. I understand. I think there is a pretty sizable gap in between proficiency in the major leagues and SEC baseball from what we see. But also a lot of that can be skewed on TV when we watch it, when you got camera angles not quite straight on behind the plate and the whole thing. And then you got massively passionate fan bases who do not want to hear anything about fairness. They just want to hear what's fair to their side as well. So I think all this is going to continue to improve, but it not quite at the level that we would like to see it done as quickly as we'd like to see it done. You with me on that?
I agree. And technology's already, as coaches, there's TrackMan now, which immediately after a game tells us in the strike zone how it's done. And believe me, there are a lot of next days when that guy would move from the plate to third, they would ask me because they didn't maybe have access to it that quick. You finish a game at 11, you turn around playing the next day. And there were a lot of days that goes, Stu, how did TrackMan say I did? They didn't say, how did you think I did? Or how did, Coach Tanner or Coach Kingston think I did? And I would say, dude, according to it, you missed 3 calls. And they were all in the same location. Is there a chance I can get a copy of that? Absolutely. And their director of umpires gets some. And that's why a lot have even gotten so much better, because we all have weaknesses in our vision as umpires. Maybe it's that high pitch, it's that low pitch, as a left-handed hitter. Those guys work really hard at it. And for what I'm saying is, when the video review came in, I don't remember a game in the last few years where I thought we just got hosed, because I just felt like, okay, we got to look at it. I thought he tagged him. He said he didn't. We thought he left early. Obviously he didn't, because on the field it's moving so quick. All I'm trying to say when I started this, and I didn't want this to go on such a long tangent for you, is I just think it'd be a cool part of the game to just, when everything's calmed down, just say, hey, I know it was a controversial play on the tag or this and that. What did y'all see? What did they tell y'all on video review? How did you come to that answer? Let's move on. To me, in our world, not asking, I don't think that much.
No doubt, man. Troy says you're expected to be perfect the first day and then improve from there as an umpire and as a guy who's done it before. Yeah, and it's not fair. And that's part of the reason I think we want to hear from them too, to get it from their perspective. Like I wanted to hear from Phil Mickelson yesterday, and I wanted him to be a human being and say, it's gonna hurt if I get booed. That's not fun. Nobody likes to be booed. Yes, I want to play on the PGA Tour again, and I think I should have that right. But he didn't do it in a really honest way. He did it in a PR advised, you're going to make millions of dollars sponsorship, don't screw it all up. And that is what I hold against those guys at this point. I think what you're talking about is much simpler and just an easy way to improve the game of baseball in general, especially the college game. Now, the problem is, right, how we move forward with replay and the whole thing, and that suspension of responsibility thing that you're talking about, saying, hey, it was a guy in Birmingham, man, what can I do about it? It's just that is mind-boggling to me that that's where we're at in this thing. I'm hopeful we can get a lot better, a lot quicker moving forward with this thing, because it is important. That's good to hear from the coach's perspective that you do start to feel a lot better about it when you have the chance to erase those egregious calls that used to be there. That's the whole point of replay.
Well, my dad only really got mad at me one time in my life growing up. And like most people, whoever my older brother pulled for, of course, I had to pull for the opposite. My older brother's a Clemson fan. Obviously, you know, I'm a Gamecock fan. But the 85 World Series, I got thrown out of my house. And if you remember the 85 World Series, my dad's a lifelong Cardinals fan. And one of the worst calls in the history of baseball at first base against the Kansas City Royals. Well, I didn't like the Royals, but I had to pick on my brother and my dad took it. Can you imagine how the course may have changed for the Cardinal fans? That was one of the worst plays at first base ever called. If replay was in effect, now they'd have went back and said, hey, he's out. Basically, World Series over. So from that moment on in my life, when video came out, that's the play I always think of, is that changing how we're fans, and we really do take this serious. And I think we deserve it as coaches and fans now that technology is so great. I love the fact that I really think, and yeah, maybe the Michigan Vanderbilt play, maybe it's still not right, but boy, at least you feel like they at least tried to get it right. Back in the day, it was just safe out and move on, and you can't argue, you can't talk. So I feel much better about how our game has evolved that way. And again, you can quickly go look at the number of ejections. They're down incredibly over the last few years. In college baseball especially, there's just not a ton of things you want to argue about anymore. Unless you're Tennessee, I guess they find stuff. But I don't remember. I'm just trying to think over the last couple of years, maybe 3 or 4 ejections in college baseball. I mean, where they'd warn you and you realize, hey, enough, let's turn it down. It really weren't. And gosh, in my first 10 years of college baseball, I felt like it was somebody maybe every game or so many games getting thrown out because you were mad the whole game after a call. So I think it's really helped, and I think it'll continue to get better. I can only imagine now that Omaha's going to crank up. They're going to probably have the strike zone up, kind of their typical Sunday night baseball type stuff that they'll put technology to it. It'll be kind of interesting to see what they do with it.
Yeah, they put the K zone up in a college game. I will be fascinated to see how that works out, because I feel like college catchers, and I was watching it last night too. I think this was the Oregon State game. They were stealing strikes all over the place. The way that college catchers do it. We talked to the North Greenville freshman catcher the other day, Campbell, and he was saying he was going to steal 10 strikes. It's like, oh my God, you're going to steal 10 strikes in a game. And I bet he probably did it. I think I saw about 10 strikes stolen last night in the super regional game there at Oregon State that Auburn ended up winning. Your boy Sonny D, home run early. Then he beats the shift a little bit after that. I think he had 2 of their 3 or 4 hits is all they got, and yet they ended up winning that sucker. It's half of the field. Before we move on to that, Stuart, I wanted to get details out of you. You brought up the 85 World Series, and it's really the first World Series I remember as a 7-year-old. I barely remember. I think it was the Tigers winning in 84. I think I remember like the celebration is all that stuck with me as a 6-year-old. As a 7-year-old, I was all in on baseball, right? And these 2 teams are right in my RBI video game playing days. And I love playing with the Cardinals because they're so fast and you get steal bases and the whole thing. But I don't remember the specific play you're talking about. I'm guessing it was either Willie McGee, Vince Coleman, or Tom Herr running to first base for the Cardinals. Is that what's going on?
Well, no, if I remember correct now, I'm trying to think too, because I'd have been about 12. It was the Royals.
Okay, let me guess who that might have been. That would have been Hal McRae. Yeah. It would have been Willie Wilson, I believe. It would have been George Brett, obviously. I'm guessing not beating that thing out. They had big first baseman.
It wasn't Steve Balboni beating it out either.
Steve Balboni, big first baseman. Nice. All right, so maybe we'll go back and look at those specifics.
Yeah, we'll have to get our names and all right. It was one of those, if I can kind of remember, because I was thrown out immediately of my house and I spent the night at my grandparents, because I think it was pitcher covering first type play.
Right.
So one of the, a first baseman or maybe a second baseman, but it was one of those. a guy coming across the base, which looked clearly like he stepped on it. It was the Cardinals on defense. I remember that.
Okay.
And it would have just been like the second out, and it seemed like it had been an insignificant inning and World Series over. And the guy runs in and does a dramatic safe call, and it just changed the complete. It was Game 6.
Gotcha.
The Royals come back to win and then won Game 7. And it was just one of those calls that even just like, a few years ago, the Tigers no-hitter.
Right. And
I don't think that umpire looked like he was miserable from that point on. He didn't mean to miss the last out on the no-hitter. And think if you could have gone back just a few years ago in that era and said, hey, he is out. You get your perfect game. You get your no-hitter. And it wasn't even in play back then. So it's just amazing how I think you can walk away from games now and feel better about things that you can do.
Jim Joyce, still the umpire. I remember his name and his reaction probably more than his name and the call and the whole thing. And let's see, if it was a play at first, then it was Jack Clark fielding it at first, probably making the toss. Yes. Maybe Joaquin Andahar covering first base, or Jim Tudor. Was that their other back in the day? Man. Okay, they bring back all the names for me back in the day for the Royals and Cardinals. 85. I like how you took it back there.
Well, before we leave video, here's the one I've always wondered: how did they get the immaculate reception right?
Right.
Have you ever thought of? Now, I'm a Browns fan, so the Steelers, of course, got the benefit of the doubt on every call. But how did they get that right in the 70s? To think it was like that far off the ground, and to just think that's how much they really were good officials. Video now just helps. It helps you. It's the same reason we have cameras at our homes. It's not saying we're trying to catch stuff. We're just trying to, when stuff goes wrong, that gives you another way to go back and get it right.
So the SEC West now half the field. That doesn't include LSU, doesn't include last year's national champion in Mississippi State, doesn't include a couple of teams set to join the SEC soon in Texas and Oklahoma. Auburn making it 4 last night, joining Arkansas, Ole Miss, and Texas A&M. And this is a year that the SEC was supposed to be down, Stuart.
Yeah, it's and you and I both know it'll never be down. And to think that Texas and Oklahoma, whenever they get that sorted out and they join, that'd be 6 of the 8. I mean, it's really amazing to think of the level of baseball. And, obviously you and I had picked our winners, Ole Miss going into Southern Miss, and just basically threw a shutout. I mean, they
nothing. Yeah.
I mean, I just could have never, if you'd have told me last week, hey, they're going to not even score. No way with the offense Southern Miss had, that environment. And I'm just so proud of them to have done it. And it is going to be exciting World Series, and it's spread out, so you'll get to see the kind of top guys a lot with their arms. So guys will better come back more than once. So I think the sport's going to continue to grow. I just hope people that haven't noticed it will as it gets going.
So you got me on Texas and East Carolina. You had your 20% chance there after East Carolina won the opener. I thought I was in the driver's seat, but you got that one right. I got the Notre Dame pick over Tennessee correct, and I was afraid I was going to lose that one too, even after they won. I got the Texas A&M over Louisville pick on you. We both missed the Virginia Tech pick, but we got everything else right. We got Arkansas on the road. To me, that was the surprising part of this thing, right? I think it's 3 seeded teams out of the 8 going to Omaha. And that means only 3 home teams ended up winning out of the 8. Let me make sure, double check that one. We got Texas A&M, you got Stanford, and actually that might be it as I look at it. The other seeded team might have done it on the road, and they did. It was Texas on the road. So only 2 out of the 8 super regionals, and that is defying the odds. Typically, man, if you're at home super regional weekend, that road to Omaha is so much more successful than it turned out to be this year.
Yeah, and you can see what the SEC does for its teams. Auburn, I'm not saying Oregon State's the a fire ant of a place to go into, but the SEC teams just are not intimidated going on the road, because every weekend on the road you're getting yelled at, screamed at, booed, and they're cheering for the other team. So I do think that the SEC teams have an advantage over other teams when they go on the road. And Ole Miss was a case in point. Miami, I think, was a 3 seed when Ole Miss went down, their national 3 seed, and just never really felt challenged in a way of the crowd or intimidated. And then obviously they get to beat Miami, and then Miami's out quickly of their own regional. So and Auburn, it's impressive. I don't think any of us would have picked Auburn 8 weeks ago, maybe even halfway into the SEC season. We thought they were pretty good. Everybody was kind of excited about Sonny D because he looks like everybody's buddy hitting. And, I don't know if we'd have said they're a World Series team, but their head coach, Butch Thompson, we talked about him a little bit, I think me and you last week. He's just so calm that his teams play that way. When everybody's getting excited, he doesn't. It's the exact opposite of what we saw at Tennessee, where everybody's getting mad and all of a sudden your best player's ejected. At Auburn, that's not going to be what happens. You're just going to have to beat them. You're going to have to beat them for 9 innings or whatever. And I'm super excited for Butch. He's a guy that's just been a friend of mine in this business a long time, and he's built a program there that kind of a little bit goes unnoticed with the LSUs and Arkansas and A&M and all going on in the SEC West. So it's impressive to see him there too.
He and Mike Bianco from Ole Miss joining the two-timers club, really, that are getting back to the College World Series for the second time, and the numbers are ridiculous. I think it makes it 6 out of the 7 coaches in the SEC West now have been there more than once, and there are only 8 other coaches outside of the SEC total that have done it. It is a massive sign of just pure dominance. And that Auburn closer coming in last night, I think he had to get 8 or 9 outs, and he had just a wipeout changeup going. And it was still at a point where the shadows were on the plate. The pitcher was in the sun, and they had a big time advantage, and he took advantage of it. And Auburn just riding that thing right to Omaha, man.
Yeah, I thought of that yesterday when they had to start both of those West Coast games early, because Stanford even went, I guess at like 2 o'clock. And then obviously them Oregon State and Auburn coming back. You're right. You don't typically get shadows involved with postseason college baseball very much, unless you're maybe at Omaha, because most people stagger it so they don't have to. So I think that was a big factor in yesterday's game.
And you mentioned Sonny D, the transfer from Mercer. I think his home run yesterday put him above Frank Thomas for most home runs hit in a season at Auburn. I think just behind maybe one off the school record. Anytime you pass Frank Thomas at Auburn, that's a pretty impressive company. Yeah,
if you bring Frank Thomas's name up, you've done something special. And it's just and now that we won't get into it today, but the whole transfer portal, you can just imagine what and I just saw where Mercer's top hitter this year went in the transfer portal. So I guess he's thinking, I'll just jump on those coattails and do it. And that'll be, the portal ends June. I guess June has 30 days. So you can't go in the portal after June 30th. So as you and I talk, hopefully over the next couple of weeks, I think it'll maybe even ramp up a little bit more but then the draft's not till July 15th. So this is a really weird time to figure things out as a college baseball person.
No doubt about it. And the College World Series starts Friday afternoon. You got any inkling about who you feel like is going to run to a title? I was talking about it yesterday, just how hard it is to predict. The 1999 stat of the number 1 overall seed, that's the last time a number 1 overall seed won the College World Series in college baseball is the best example of that. But now you got 8 teams running on so much momentum, and then they run into each other at the College World Series. You see it every year, and to me, this year might be the most unpredictable of all of them.
I think it may be. I was kind of looking, trying to figure out who matches up with who, because you never do that far in advance. You do a lot with regionals and super regionals, but I think you're right. I mean, me personally with Ole Miss, it looks like they're going to be rolling in with momentum, but it's going to be a week later. So a lot of that energy that you had and adrenaline kind of wanes. And then you match up with a team like you just said, who thinks they have momentum. So it's going to be some just really interesting matchups throughout the whole thing as it breaks down. And again, you get a day off. So as baseball players, you're really geared to keep your momentum every day. That's why you play so much. The College World Series is different because you get days off and you have to go practice, and you kind of, do an Iverson. We got to practice. You don't want to practice this time of year, but you have to just keep momentum going, go take BP, some ground balls at Creighton and do that type stuff. So it's going to be fun to watch. And I'm fired up to see who kind of keeps their momentum through game 1.
Wait, so as a coach, I think what I heard is it's not as favorable a schedule as you would prefer, as opposed to a fan. Like just going out there and experiencing it from the fan standpoint, I put it at the top of my sports list, man. I've been to a bunch of events, but the pacing of it is fantastic because you get the every other day of your team, and it's not just slammed in there. But from a coaching perspective, you would prefer maybe to play every day instead of every other?
Well, you enjoyed it when you got arms back. So when you would get that day off and that meant you could get another guy back, you enjoy that part. But baseball is designed to just play every day. You want to, especially when you win, you want to get back out there. And then when you lose, you might want out there even more because you want to go get that back. I remember in 2002 when we lost to Georgia Tech, it felt like forever to get to that Sunday game. And then we ran into Nebraska and that crazy situation there, and we're very fortunate to win. And you wanted to just keep playing, but it's staggered. So I don't want to say as a coach you don't like it because it does help your arms, or if a guy tweaks a hamstring or something, it gives them a day to recover. But it's just a lot more time of keeping them focused, because in baseball you get off days, but once the season starts, say Monday's your off day, they're still in the building. So they're still in the training room. They still may be in the weight room on their own. You see each other 7 days a week for the last now 16, 18 weeks, and something was happening. So now these days where you're trying to say, hey, you guys got to still get up. Let's go get our practice in because the field's available at this time. And then you catch yourself watching the games. And so, it's just, I don't know. To me, I always favored the SEC tournament, where it was just play till you were done. And I made the championship game there 4 times. And I always felt that momentum had been built. But in the College World Series, and we were fortunate to play in the last game there, there's just a lot of time you have to figure out what are these guys doing. Make sure they don't do something dumb. Make sure they don't, sleep too long and be lethargic. So it was like, can't we just go do what we do every day? So, but we knew it was spread out that way on purpose. As a fan, I tell people all the time, there's 2 things a college baseball person you should try to do. Go to the SEC tournament. And if you got a buddy with an RV, take it, because that's the way to do it there. And then go to College World Series. And if you can stay for a couple of days or however long, it's just what an environment it is.
Craig says, I'm picking Arkansas, so they're sure to go 2 in Q. I understand how that goes.
I know how Craig feels. That's why I don't want to pick anyone. I just don't want to jinx anybody.
Troy says he went 2 and 6 in the Supers, so whoever I pick will also go 0 and 2. Well, I mean, that's what I'm talking about this year, especially with all the road teams successful in the Supers, really kind of going against the odds in a lot of ways, and it's why I mentioned I know we're a prisoner of the moment. And Friday at 2:00 we get the College World Series started. We're just coming off the Super Regionals, finishing up last night, but that's why I say just so unpredictable. And Tennessee's the best example, right? Clearly the best team in college baseball this year.
Yes.
Who did I see put it out? I think Chad Holbrook on the social media. It's not the best team who wins; it's a team that plays the best. And that's the brilliance of just sports in general, but especially college baseball this time of year, huh, Stuart?
Yeah, it will. And don't forget, now the stadium also in Omaha plays a big part in these games. We've watched the SEC stadiums. They're not crackerjack parks, but they're geared for power. And then you get to Omaha, and that stadium is huge. It almost feels like Birmingham used to prepare you if you could get to College World Series in the new stadium because it's so big. So the new stadium definitely favors pitching. And God, we talk about the Cardinals of those days, a fast outfield. So those teams that can really pitch and have guys that can run around out there typically do fairly well at Omaha.
And reminded me of the old Busch Stadium AstroTurf where Ozzie Smith was doing his backflips.
Yeah.
Vince Coleman and Willie McGee running down balls in the outfield.
Yeah.
Kicking it old school today. I like it. Got to get into your other area of expertise here.
Okay.
The WWE has signed its 2nd class of college athletes to name, image, and likeness deals. To me, I don't know if your worlds could combine more in a sentence than what I just said.
I don't think they do. I've always, my son Hayden, I tell him, I'm so proud, but don't forget one day if you can just find a way to be a part of WrestleMania would really be one of the crowning moments in our athletic world for me. So if we can, he and I have both joked when we're done coaching, playing, I'm going to WrestleMania. And I've had, I think now 4 of my former players go and send me pictures. I even got a nice SummerSlam shirt a few years ago from one. So I just, to get a WWE name, image, and likeness, to me, that puts you just in a class with very few people.
So
It's
the way
impressive.
that this thing is going down, the WWE has signed athletes kind of across the country, but for the first time, they've got some from some different sports. And this one makes sense a lot to me from the female perspective: gymnastics, cheer and dance, maybe not quite so much in volleyball. Then you got from the men's perspective, the basketball, to get a couple of basketball players as well. I think they got a heavyweight wrestler involved here. They've got some Power 5 football guys, 4 Power 5 football programs involved here. This is just an absolute natural fit, isn't it, with college sports, which The Rock, for instance, is a great example of a guy who played college football and went on to massive stardom in wrestling at first and then on from there. But combining all kind of worlds and letting athletes get a little money in their pocket in the process.
Yeah. And I always have to explain to my friends, wrestling, they like to tell me it's fake. It's choreographed, Tim. It's not fake.
Well done.
There's a lot of reality to it as well. So to see gymnasts and different things in it makes sense, especially with it. But I just think it's kind of cool to see, because it's just another avenue that athletes can see. The old commercial, they'll go pro in something else. I never thought it'd be wrestling. So we can add it to the list. But it's cool that WWE realizes what these kids are doing, and not just it feels like sometimes with this NIL stuff at the beginning, it's only the quarterbacks, or it's only the, this guy or that guy. So it is kind of cool to see someone bringing in those other athletes, and gosh, volleyball and those type, they have tremendous athletes. So it is really cool to see that. And I know I'm a little bit short with you today, but boy, I've waited 50 minutes, and I know you've noticed it too. I got one of the coolest texts that you ever get as a coach last night. Jonah Bride starting today for Oakland Athletics at Fenway Park. And I'm trying to figure out, I don't have the MLB thing right now. I got mad at DirecTV years ago, so that's for another show. But I got to figure out tonight how to watch that, because as we found out, and I texted him last night and just said, hey, to me and my family, you've been a big leaguer before you were one, because he's one of the classiest players I've ever coached. And he texted me back and said, Coach, thank you. I've just landed. They told me I'm going to start tomorrow night. How about that? In Fenway Park. That's just like he went back to spring training, Tim, thinking he may catch. So he and I worked over Christmas break. We would go to different places where we could go inside, use pitching machines to work on catching. And he worked all January, was here a lot in Columbia, working on catching. And he said, I think this is my shot to become a utility player, maybe even get called up. But to then get called up and what he's so really natural at, third base, I'm super excited for John. And I have no way I was going to get off here today without talking about him for a few minutes with you.
Good call, man. It's my mistake for not bringing it up sooner. I remember watching him I was on the field. I forget what for, probably a typical preview thing, and just getting video as a camera nerd at the TV station there. And there was a guy at third base fielding balls, and he was making it look so easy. And I didn't recognize him. And it was Jonah Bride, I think, in his first few days there, getting ready for that season. I don't know, 4 years ago at this point, maybe his first season in Carolina. And just consistent and solid is how I would describe his Carolina career. Since you know him so well, give us a little bit more on. I mean, consistent and solid is so important in baseball specifically. Whit Merrifield, another guy I would describe in that way, and obviously has gone on to have a tremendous Major League Baseball career. But I don't know if a lot of Gamecock fans would have seen Jonah Bride getting to this level.
Right.
With maybe not the eye-catching, eye-popping stats in college.
Well, it was awesome, too, the scout that drafted him, Neil Avant. Neil was a coach at UNC Greensboro as a baseball lifer. He became a scout, now probably 10 years ago. And at 1 a.m. last night, he texted me, your boy's going to make the show, which is a big deal for an area scout, when no one else really maybe thought he was, like you're saying, that guy. We all saw it with the glove. He reminded me defensively so much of Brian Busher, but Bush – during his college career really hit. Jonah still hit, but he wasn't the flashy hitter. He didn't hit, 3 in your lineup. He hit, maybe 5th or wherever he fell in. But every one of us that coached him knew if this guy gets in the right organization and they respect what he is, which is a grinder kind of Midwest guy, he ain't going to get you with talks and speeches. He's just going to smile every so often when you say something. And he got into Oakland A's organization that respects those type guys, and they continued to let him work his way up, and just super excited that he's going to get to do it. And he's a guy that, he could just stick because he's going to show up every day. And he's going to take care of himself. He's not going to be flashy. He's going to make the plays you need him to make. And a little known fact about Jonah Bride, and I bring this up, hopefully he'll see this. He still owes me a Garth Brooks autograph because he went to high school with Garth's kids. So his hometown is Garth Brooks' hometown. So they went to high school together. So bring this up again so that when Jonah's flipping through the unrestricted free agent files, he'll remember he's still got to get me a signature of Garth Brooks. But that's here and there today. Let him play his game. So we'll go back to that later.
He's a big leaguer now, so it should be no problem at all. And Garth's love of baseball. You got the connection there too. And that's out in Oklahoma, right? Their hometowns. So, and again, such a strange connection in so many ways. An Oklahoma to South Carolina connection. I retweeted Braden Webb, who said they've been talking about this forever. Another Oklahoma, South Carolina guy in pro ball now. So can you just rehash how in the world this ever happens?
Well, it's junior college, and that's the beauty of junior college baseball. When you have these aspirations to play at the South Carolinas and wherever else, those kids went to junior college. They could have gone to other schools.
JUCO forever, Stuart, and there's never been the Oklahoma-South Carolina connection. Is this a direct result of Omaha and the success the Gamecocks had on national TV, being a national
No
brand?
doubt. No doubt. Braden Webb, they'll talk way more than Jonah Bride ever will. So if you need one of them to talk, get Braden. But it was a connection with those being teammates, and it was back in Coach Holbrook's era when he was here tenure, got him, and it just opened the door. I mean, Braylon Wimmer's from Oklahoma. There's no doubt South Carolina's product become national, and when you have success, obviously in Omaha right there for young guys, and then it just recruiting has gotten so much smaller. Back in the beginning, no one ever left that part of the country to come to when I would tell Coach Tanner or Coach Tolman about a guy, the answer was always there's too many schools between their hometown and Columbia. They can't get past this university, next university. Well, now, because of the way you do. It's not a big deal to have a kid from New York or wherever because of flights, and it's easier so that, there's kids that say I'm only a 3-hour flight from you. That was something you never heard when I first started coaching. It was like, Coach, it'll take me 11 hours to drive there from so-and-so. Now it's like, oh, no, it's a 3-hour flight. It's direct. So it's made the world of baseball a lot smaller. And then the personalities, what got them here? Because there's no doubt without Braylon Wimmer, Jonah Bride probably ain't here because it kind of made him comfortable to make that jump. And they only went 1 year JUCO. So he came here and had a full career. Remember, he got to play 3 years here. So, that was a cool thing for him too.
All right, I got 2 questions for you about Jonah Bride specifically.
Right.
So you mentioned grinder and being able to do that every single day. Well, to get a spot on an SEC baseball team, I think you got to be that guy to some degree in your high school career, right? So how does a guy like Bride then separate himself amongst already the best of the best guys who are playing at an SEC program like South Carolina?
That's a great question. The biggest thing he did is and I've asked him because I didn't recruit him. I got to coach him for 3 years, but it was just every time you would talk to a coach in that area, his name would come up. And that was what gave him this opportunity. So I'd call about Tim Hill, but before that coach would get off the phone, he'd say, hey, man, over at so-and-so JUCO, there's a kid, Jonah Bride, you need to check out. Every time we play him, it was funny, even the SEC. He was just such a nice kid. I'd have third base coaches. At the end of the series, you're shaking hands, and they go, hey, man, I like Bride. What a special kid. He just handles himself. So he was so strong with his personality without trying to be and his talent as a third baseman that he just kept getting attention of other people to work through it. And he was a consistent hitter. He's a 300 type hitter, but he's not hitting 17 home runs at JUCO or never hitting them in South Carolina. But it was always hey, you need to check out that Bride kid. Or you'd call a guy and go, hey, have y'all played you remember Jonah Bride? Heck yeah, I remember him. Best defensive guy we've seen in 10 years. So he kept building his resume that way.
My other question was, you mentioned him catching, and I read that, and I was very surprised about him being a pro catcher, having been so good as a third baseman. How do you approach, especially with a son as a high school senior? You know, it used to be that if you played a bunch of positions, you had a chance to increase your value.
Yeah.
And then it became, hey, if you play a bunch of positions, that is a sign that you're not very good at one single position and you're kind of devaluing yourself.
Yeah.
Have we come back around? Am I way off on this assessment? Where are you with playing multiple positions for young players especially?
Well, I'll tell you where I'm at. I'll tell you one funny thing. Thank goodness for Jonah Bride, because my son needed to wear glasses. And contacts at 13, 14 years old, as you know, they're aggravating.
No doubt.
Jonah Bride wore the glasses, right, when Hayden was 12, 13, and it's just made it – I always pick on Jonah that thank you for making that cool. But here's my opinion, but my opinion is based on experience. I love kids that can play more positions because our rosters are limited. Realize when we go travel on the road, you only take 25 to 27 guys. Someone gets hurt, someone gets sick. I love guys that can do more. Jonah was doing it because they were trying to make him more valuable. They didn't know if he's going to be a big league basher kind of third baseman, but if he could catch and help him be the third catcher, maybe you get him some spot days at third. But I coached a guy at Ole Miss, and I'll tell you his name at the end. This is my youth camp story, and then I may have to run. I got to go actually speak at a youth camp at 11:30.
Well done.
But when you have youth camp, everyone plays what position? Shortstop.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my God. It's like you'd have 16 shortstops and some poor kid would stand at first. So I tell this story every youth camp I ever worked. It's a true story. We recruit this kid to Ole Miss, and I was the outfield coach. Dan McDonald was the infield coach. I wanted this kid in the outfield. He wanted him on the infield. We would get in like childlike arguments in the locker room. And finally, Coach Bianco had enough. And he said, hey, look, Stu, here's the deal. You guys shut up. He's going to play third base for us. Now, think about my outfield. I had Alex Presley, Seth Smith, the guy Charlie Babineau. Two of those guys played in the big leagues. Babineau, won the SEC Player of the Year. He's like, you got enough guys in the outfield, okay? Relax. He's going to play third for us. I kept complaining. So we came to another deal called an arbiter in. I think we brought in our team doctor. I would not drop it. So what we came up with is he could work with me during BP and shag fly balls. And then on position defense, Coach McDonald won. He gets him, blah, blah, blah. The kid goes on to be a 3-time All-American third baseman, gets drafted in the first round, and becomes Rookie of the Year in 2009, playing left field for the Florida Marlins, Chris Coughlin. And Chris, to this day, tells people, if those coaches would have just stuck me there, I don't know if I'd ever had my career that I did. And he always jokes, too, he got a ring with the Chicago Cubs. He was on that Chicago Cubs team with C.J. Edwards, which was cool for me to have two guys I knew so well. And Chris is like all great players. He said, Stu, on the roster, or he called me Lake House. He goes, Lake House, they call me a utility guy on that roster. I know that makes you proud. And I said, yeah. He goes, and then he'll hold his ring up, and he goes, they really call me a world champion. So I tell kids, hey, maybe you are the best shortstop in your town. Maybe you're the best one ever. I don't know. But I can tell you more stories of Jonah Brides and Chris Coughlin's and guys that moved around the field and had great careers than I can the one guy who keyholed himself into, hey, I'm a left fielder. Sorry, man. That's all I can do. So I preach it. That's why my son catches, plays first, plays the outfield. And I want you to be able to be the guy when the coach turns to you and goes, hey, Tim, can you play left? I want you to go, yeah. Hey, Tim, can you play second? Oh, yeah. Hey, I need you to catch. Can you do that? Sure, I can. Because you become valuable. And the more valuable you become, like Jonah Bride, the more options you get. And the more options and more chances you get, the more chances you have to succeed. And that's why today this is one of those days as a coach, you're like childlike because you remember that guy, the struggles at times you went through, and to now know as he runs on that field tonight for the rest of his life, he's a big leaguer. Cup of coffee, a thermos of coffee, I don't care what he gets for the rest of his life. He's a big leaguer, and no one deserves it more.
And doing it at Fenway Park on top of
Fenway
that
Park.
with Jackie Bradley Jr. out in the outfield on the other team. Good for you guys and good for Gamecock fans for sure. I know you got to run, man. Good luck with the speech today. Make sure to mention Jonah Bride at least 4 times.
No doubt. They're going to hear his name a bunch today, and I look forward to the next time we talk.
Stuart Lake, ladies and gentlemen, I would say mid-season. He's in postseason form there. Good stuff, and I appreciate him bringing up the personal connection with Jonah Bride. And, Drew Meyer, who he mentioned in that one as the first big-time recruit that he landed, said something on this show that really changed my approach to my sons with baseball. He's trying to teach his son and his young players, he's a coach now as well, to throw it hard and hit it far. And as youth coaches, especially, I'm wearing my little shirt here. We're not even gonna have a show on Friday because I'm going to a little coach pitch state tournament up in Taylor's near Greenville. But we get so focused in on kids playing a certain position and where they can win, where they can help the team win, and the whole thing. We screw that up pretty good. It's really easy to screw that up as a coach, and to not stress the overriding approach of you need to move around. You need to see baseball from all kinds of perspectives and keep yourself open-minded about moving forward and the whole thing. So something to keep in mind for sure. Throw it hard, hit it far. That's the main thing you want to develop, I think, in young players. And then they'll figure it out. If they're good enough, they'll figure out eventually where they have value in baseball, whether it's in high school, college, and now in the minor leagues where Jonah Bride has been, all the way up to the major leagues for the Oakland A's tonight in Boston. It's great to hear that story specifically. Let me pop that back up there. Former Gamecock Jonah Bride to make his Major League Baseball debut. Great to hear that story in so many ways. What I heard was this is a nice guy not finishing last, and not a look at me kind of guy. But if you continue to produce at the level necessary to produce for a pro organization, that you continue to get promoted. Right. And Whit Merrifield, maybe the first example I saw of that, covering the Gamecocks through the years. 7 years, I think he toiled in the minors, just day in and day out. And the more baseball guys I talk to, the more I respect that. And now several years for Jonah Bride, and already up to the big leagues for the Oakland A's. And with that organization kind of being where it is, Braves fans know that they just took advantage of the A's and not playing at their playoff level they had grown accustomed to. He produces in the big leagues, and he's been hitting, man. He has just been flat out hitting. Looked at his numbers recently, AAA, AA before that. You hit in the big leagues, you stay in the big leagues. And something to keep an eye on tonight for Gamecock fans specifically. Jonah Bride making his Major League debut. Congratulations to him. I think the number is somewhere in the 50s now. I think it's 56, 57, maybe all-time Gamecocks who've made it to the major leagues. I think he's number 7 this year right now playing in the big leagues, and number 8 if Max Schrock gets off an injured list relatively soon. Impressive numbers. And that goes back to kind of where we started the show, and some of the comments that Landon Powell made on yesterday's show right here specifically. And I want to play those for you. Even if you heard them, I think they're worth hearing again, seeing again, and then we'll discuss it again, because it is, guys like Landon, who ended up making it to the major leagues and caught a perfect game and the whole thing, elevated the Gamecock program to a specific expectation level to be amongst the best programs in the country year in and year out. And that hasn't happened the last several years. And Landon's a coach, and he makes no bones about wanting to be the coach eventually of the South Carolina Gamecocks. So I'll let you hear what he had to say specifically, and then we'll discuss. This is Landon Powell from yesterday from the coach's office there in North Greenville, just a few days off of winning that Division II national championship.
I love Tigerville. You know, this town of Greenville. My wife grew up here, born and raised. Her family lives here. You know, our nieces and nephews are here in town. This has become a home for us. Like going to church yesterday, sitting in church. Like, you know, we did my daughter's funeral in that church. You know, the guy that was leading worship is a really close friend of mine. And, you know, our Bible study group was all there around us. And it's like, man, why would I want to, you know, why am I like in a hurry to get out of this? This is a great season of life right now. And so, you know, I'm not chasing any other jobs. I'm happy where my feet are. But, you know, I've told these recruits and I've told these guys in my office, there's 4 players in my office right now listening to me talk. I've told them from day one, like a job that I would take would be the University of South Carolina. There's no secret about that. You know, that's my alma mater. You know, I was shaped into the person I am at that university. I love that fan base. That is a place that I would go. But I'm not in a hurry to do it. I'm not, you know, they got a coach there now. I believe in him. I have his back. And I mean that. Like, I know there's a lot of people that don't have his back and that are questioning what's going on there right now. I'm not one of those people. I want them to be better. Am I, as a Gamecock, satisfied with what they're doing there? No, it's not. Right now, it's not good enough. But he knows that too. I promise you. And he wants to get it better. I know he does. And I have his back. I believe in him. I think he's the guy that can get turn it around and get him on track. So, you know, I by no means, I'm a Mark Kingston fan. I'm rooting for him. I hope he gets it done. But, you know, maybe 5 years from now, 10 years from now, who knows what the future holds? Maybe that job is available. And, you know, maybe I get a phone call or maybe I don't. I don't know, but I can't control that.
So good stuff there from Landon Powell yesterday. And I think you got to hear that in at least that long, right? It was almost 2 minutes to understand, to get a full appreciation or a semi-full appreciation of the position that he's in. Not chasing money, not looking for the next rung on the ladder. You don't hear that often from college coaches. But Landon Powell is not the typical college coach in so many ways, right? And in everything he's accomplished in baseball as a player, now as a coach already with a national championship under his belt, and then having gone through what he has gone through personally. He touched on it there about the funeral of his daughter. It was ESPN 60 that I think that's what it's called. Maybe it's not ESPN 60. It's something with 60 on it. They did a tremendously emotional story with the Powell family. He and his wife, Allison, talking about their loss and their grieving and sharing the story to help others who have gone through similar situations. This was several years ago while Landon was still with the Oakland A's, I believe. And anyone who's followed his career understands that he's kind of a different guy in a lot of ways. And I only mean that as a compliment. So to see him handle this in a different way compared to other coaches shouldn't surprise me, but still kind of does, just knowing the implications. Because right now you say that and things happen. Dominoes are going to fall in the college coaching world, right? Somebody's going to get hired at Clemson. Someone's going to get hired at Florida State. Other jobs under that, other good Division I jobs are open out there. Landon Powell saying that he's not interested. And to do that, that's a kind of a bold statement for anyone to make, but I can understand it from his perspective. He's got a tremendous culture established, tremendous environment around his program, a lot of advantages right now on that level, and winning is it's what it's all about in a lot of ways, and it's a byproduct in a lot of ways, right? But once you have put in all the work to establish a program that is set up to win for years and years to come, it has to be a big allure. And typically it's money that does it for coaches, right? Well, if you can double my salary, I got to take that. It's that whole Live Series Dustin Johnson line. I couldn't turn that opportunity down. It was just too great of an opportunity for me and my family. But that's not where the Powell family is. It's not who Landon Powell, to me, kind of always has been, but certainly is as we sit here today. But from the Gamecock fan perspective, I think that's where it's tricky, right? And maybe some of you guys can throw a comment on me on the live stream as we continue to roll on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook like we do every day from 10 to noon, live streaming the video version, pod being the audio version, up and rolling every day from 10 to noon, and then the podcast version archives and pops out from there. But it's really tricky from the Gamecock perspective. I think it was Ashley who hit me up on Twitter yesterday and said she really enjoyed the segment and is not pulling for the Gamecocks to lose, but would love to see Landon Powell as the head coach. And that's the really tricky part. You just heard him put it very clearly. And that this is what we have a problem with in our country a lot of times, is that we can't have two viewpoints and understand that you can actually hold those two ideas firm in your head and still be a rational, logical person. But the two viewpoints do kind of intersect here for Gamecock fans. They want to win now, immediately. They want the program. They want to be proud of the program again. And you see 4 SEC teams in the College World Series. And the Gamecocks not even make the NCAA tournament this year, not even finish above 500, at 500. And it's unfathomable for a program a decade ago that was dominating the sport. And to see a guy who helped establish that domination in the first 3-year run of the College World Series as a player who went on to the major leagues and has that on his resume, has the coaching experience now and a national championship at a lower level, has remained in the state of South Carolina and has roots, and to hear him say he supports the program and wants Mark Kingston to win, and yet wants to be the head coach at the University of South Carolina one day. I think it's a difficult thing to balance and to know what to pull for as a Gamecock fan moving forward. You want to pull for your team to win, obviously. But doing that next year would mean that Landon Powell's likelihood of becoming your head coach probably gets more and more distant. But like he said, he's taking the long view, and it's so hard for all of us to do, I think, on a daily basis, to see the big picture instead of just what happens next. And then when you look at the big picture, then to be able to focus on the steps it will take to get there, right? Well, that's the main conundrum, I think, for Gamecock fans, is that, if Mark Kingston has success, then Landon Powell becoming the head coach of the University of South Carolina gets further and further away. And with him right there in North Greenville, so close, and watching the results, and for those of us on this show to be able just to see it, right? You saw the dog in the office, the players in the office, the relationship between players and coaches. That's so special. And then achieving so much. Let's be very clear. For good coaches, those relationships exist in every good program out there. And I think they probably exist maybe more tangibly at the non-tier 1 college Division I programs, because it has to be so transactional. You have to be producing at those schools. Otherwise, you're not going to play. So your team's not going to win. Your coach is not going to have a job. And I think maybe at lower levels, you still have that pressure for sure, but maybe at a slightly different pace, slightly different level. But just to see it on display and to see the production at such a high level at Division II North Greenville with Landon Powell in charge, to hear him speak and to know what he represents, what he represented when he played for the Gamecock baseball program, now what he represents just as a human being, as a family man, as a alum, but as a baseball coach too. It's a tricky spot for Gamecock fans, I think, that they find themselves in, because the easy thing to do is to say, no, definitely switch it, make the switch, man. Get Landon Powell in there. I tweeted when I saw the news several weeks ago that Mark Kingston would be back for the 2023 season, that I don't think Mark Kingston's a bad baseball coach. But I am surprised to see that the Gamecock baseball program has found itself where it is a decade after dominating the college baseball landscape. I don't think anybody knows if Mark Kingston can be the guy to get them back. You heard the words of support there from Landon Powell that he thinks he can be. I have no idea if Landon Powell could be the guy to get them back. I do know it's very easy from the fan standpoint to say, hey, let's try that guy who we know has just had national championship success. And I think it's real hard for Gamecock fans to say what they heard Landon Powell say, and that they still really support Mark Kingston and believe he can be the guy, just because the evidence from 4 years isn't there. And the previous regime, it didn't happen either under Chad Holbrook. And it gets further and further away, that tremendous run that ended the College World Series a decade ago. So it's a tough spot, man. Tough spot for Gamecock fans specifically. I think Landon Powell navigated his spot. It's not a tough spot for him, right? He's got people blowing up his phone. He's a popular coach, a rising star in the coaching world for sure. Is popular amongst the Gamecock fan base. I think might always be. Never knowing if he does not become the University of South Carolina head coach, you certainly, as a fan, love to hear what he had to say. It's just a tricky spot for sure for Gamecock fans now moving forward. Other than, hey, you want the program to win. If they win, then he takes care of everything, right? Then maybe Landon Powell can go on and win 10 more Division II College World Series and eventually make the move much later in his career. How this all plays out is going to be really fascinating to continue to watch evolve. But and I didn't play the comment here, but also there's a portion of Landon's comments, and he actually started, and maybe even more why I felt it necessary to bring it up, that Clemson has the baseball opening, and as opposed to the Gamecocks that don't have a coach's spot open. But with firing Monty Lee recently, his name has popped up, and he shot that down very definitively. Not just saying, he started his comments by saying he doesn't think he's on Clemson's list to begin with. But even if he were, how that just wouldn't work for him. And I was kind of surprised that's not where Monty Lee came at this thing in the beginning. Kind of surprised, I say, but they're very different. Their backgrounds are very different, right? Monty played at the College of Charleston, not for the University of South Carolina Gamecocks. He was an assistant, and Ray Tanner was kind of his mentor, and that's why I thought it was really, really weird. It was another really odd situation to have a guy who was groomed by the best coach the University of South Carolina had ever seen. I think we might have to. We certainly got to consider Don Staley replacing Ray Tanner on that totem pole. But then also was the athletic director, still is the athletics director, still was at the time the athletics director at the rival school that you take the job at. And being a South Carolina guy, having been a Gamecock guy pretty much his whole life, as I understand it, growing up in Lugoff and being more of a Gamecock fan. Monty Lee then switching that affiliation over to Clemson. It was a great opportunity. Don't get me wrong. It is everything that most coaches take the next job for, right? An opportunity that you feel like you can't pass up for both you professionally and your family for generations to come. But it didn't quite work out for Monty Lee, and now Clemson's looking for another coach, and it will not be Landon Powell. And from his perspective, it makes total sense. But again, Landon being a little bit different than most coaches. As soon as he stepped on the campus, if he were to take the job at Clemson, a certain percentage of that fan base would already hate him. And from that perspective, I think there was always a certain percentage of Clemson fans who didn't consider him a Clemson guy. And that's always been a thing at Clemson. There's some of those that are definitely thinking like that, coming at it from that perspective with the Brad Brownell situation that has just continued. I thought from a personality standpoint, he's been a pretty good fit at Clemson. Oliver Purnell certainly got to the point where he felt like he wasn't for Clemson basketball. Clemson football saw it play out very clearly with Tommy Bowden not ever being a Clemson guy, not ever accepted as that guy by the fan base. It just wasn't a perfect fit. Dabo Swinney clearly has been in so many ways. And that's why I yap about it so much. I think it is that important from the college sports perspective. The fit and the job, the fan base where it is, the expectations, who you're working for, all of that. So massively important. And I think it's why I respect as much as I do what Landon Powell had to say and why we replayed the comments. Because he understands the situation in North Greenville. Near ideal. The only thing more ideal, it sounds like to me, for Landon Powell would be the University of South Carolina baseball coach. That job isn't open right now. He expressed public support for the coach and confidence that he will be able to win there. The tricky part for that, from the Gamecock perspective, is, all right, what if that doesn't happen? Or what if you only want that to happen at a championship level for a guy who just won a national championship, even though it was a Division II, clearly can get it done as a coach. And the guy who is the current coach clearly hasn't gotten it done. Roger says, hypothetical question here. But if Tanner has retired as athletic director by the time the USC job is open, will Landon still have the desire to come home? I think that's a very good hypothetical question with where Ray Tanner is in his career and his life. Closer to retirement than to the beginning of his career, for sure. And very fair, knowing that has such a huge impact on baseball, on head coaches in college sports. It's one of the reasons, I think, why we all understand that Monty Lee is no longer the coach at Clemson, that Graham Neff has moved into that big chair as the athletic director, having worked at the university for a long time. And this is one of the ways that he can make his mark on the post-Dan Radakovich era as athletic director at Clemson. I think absolutely is the question. Will he still have the desire to come home? But it would have to also include being very comfortable, I would think, with that situation with the athletic director. I would say it would almost be easier for Landon Powell to have the desire to take the job if you don't have the strings attached to your boss. And that, I mean, I understand that they would joke about it. Ray Tanner would, that he would make a call to the dugout and it would only make Chad Holbrook mad and the whole thing. But you can't joke away the situation that it was. It was Chad Holbrook taking over for the legend, and the expectations were there, and it became too much. He didn't live up to them, and he had to move on. And I think he is proving that he's a good college baseball coach, but he's not Ray Tanner. And I would put Mark Kingston in that same category right now. Good college baseball coach, but not Ray Tanner. And from the Gamecock perspective, that's the guy who you had for decades. And that's the guy who had the program where you wanted it and beyond where you even imagined it could go, probably, with back-to-back national championships. And it might not ever get back there. And the more I watch college baseball since that time, the more I appreciate that run, and the more I think I can get a sense of just how special it was. I mean, really, really good. I mean, you hear Stuart Lake talk about Mike Bianco, and this is just the second time Ole Miss has gotten back to the College World Series under Bianco. Second time. He's been a really good coach for a long, long time. Tennessee was an amazing team. East Carolina has been a really, really good baseball program for a long time and has never made it to the College World Series. And they had an 80% chance this past weekend, having won game number 1 against the team that's been there more than any other in Texas. And they couldn't get it done. So close. So close, man. So that hypothetical question, Roger, I think I want to go the opposite direction. Will Landon still have the desire to come home? I think it would be that much stronger having Ray Tanner kind of as a retired AD, a resource, as opposed to your actual boss, where the obligation just isn't to your former player and the program that you helped build and the whole thing, but you got a bunch of other things you got to balance as the South Carolina athletics director. I agree with where Mark's coming from. No one ever beats our win streak. Seems impossible. Agreed. Especially the way that college baseball parity has shrunk. Now, maybe what we heard last week, I think it was, when Stuart Lake was talking about the NIL implications and how there are some large bidders out there for services in the transfer portal, and maybe one program, 2 programs, a handful of programs out there can separate themselves just with how we see collectives, how we saw the Texas A&M recruiting class go down. Maybe that will happen in college baseball to some degree and but even if it does, I think Tennessee just proved that can't buy College World Series championships. It couldn't even buy them a spot. Couldn't even get them a spot this year, even though they had the best team. They had the best team. There's no doubt about it. 2000, South Carolina was the best team in college baseball in the regular season. But that last part is a big deal, right? It's not the best team doesn't win the national championship every year and hasn't in college baseball since 1999. And that's what makes the game great. Mark says it stinks that it seems like we are not one of those programs with NIL dollars. I would disagree with that, Mark. From the football perspective, you got the guy who was supposed to be the number 1 overall pick that people were projecting last year, and Spencer Rattler to come play football at the University of South Carolina. I don't think the baseball program will have any problems getting guys to come to the University of South Carolina who think it will be advantageous in multiple ways in their careers. Let's put it that way. Now, maybe not one of the top 5 programs or something like that, but certainly one of the top 25, 35 programs, a program that has the possibility to do that. Wanted to switch gears a little bit, broaden things out, even though this does have to do with how important is money in sports, right? You guys watch any of this press conference yesterday up in Boston? Phil Mickelson. It is such an uncomfortable thing to watch. Just Phil Mickelson right now in general. It's so uncomfortable to watch in so many ways. First of all, he stunk it up on the golf course last week. Shot 10 over, I think, at the first Live Series event. But now coming back, playing in this U.S. Open, and all the guys on the Live Series who are eligible to play on the U.S. Open this year are playing. And the way that I read the release from the USGA about that, it makes me think it might be the last time, because they couldn't rewrite the rules fast enough to keep these guys out, is how I read that statement. I hope that they're eligible to play in the majors moving forward for forever. I'm all for competition. The unrestricted free agent show here finds it very difficult to not competition in any way. I understand there are a lot of other implications that come with guys who chose to play on the Live Series. And Phil got those questions right in his face yesterday at this press conference. And he didn't come off horribly. Let's put it that way. Let's be fair to him. But it was about as bad as I think a guy who has been in front of the TV cameras and microphones for the last 30 years could come off, because there's just very little transparency and honesty that comes through. First of all, missing the last couple of majors was really odd, right? It definitely had the sense of him just ducking questions and, I don't know, figuring out his PR strategy. And then the PR strategy is, apparently I have empathy for anyone who is connected to 9/11 and has animosity towards me. I respect everyone's opinions, and everyone has a right to their opinions. And this is where it kind of, okay, those are generic statements, right? That you would make. This is where it gets really tricky for Phil Mickelson specifically, saying that he has earned a lifetime membership on the PGA Tour and feels like he should have the option to choose the events he plays in. And this is where it is really easy to do the math and connect the dots and say, oh, well, Phil feels like he is larger than the tour. Got it. And he mentioned his gambling problems in this press conference yesterday and how he's working on them. He's glad where he is. To me, he gambled on himself here. He doubled down and said, I'm going to be able to be bigger than this. The PGA Tour needs me more than I need them, and the tour's gone the other way. And it's one of the reasons I think that he did not do what Dustin Johnson did and resign from the tour. It's that he very much, the gist I got from the press conference, believes that he should be able to pick and choose the events that he plays on the PGA Tour and basically be above what is required, what that tour requires from their members. And that's where he's got it wrong. That's where I get it. The PGA Tour could have approached this completely differently, from a position of strength in a lot of ways, and said, yeah, go play whatever you want to play. We ain't going to miss you. The old Steve Spurrier, hey, if that recruit says he don't want to come here, well, we'll just get another guy. That is a massive position of strength, I think, that is probably unrealistic to take in the business world when you're talking about a legitimate threat to your business model, which what the PGA Tour, that's what they view this Live Series, and I think should appropriately view it with all the money involved. And so they take the approach of, well, yeah, you can choose to go play for those guys. We get that they're recruiting you. They're waving a lot of money in your face. But if you go do that, you can't be with us. And that's where I'm hoping that the majors can just situation themselves right in the middle, which is where they are right now, right? They're not governed by the PGA Tour. So they can bring in those guys who have gone against the tour, have jumped for the money for the Live Series. And we get what we get this week, which was a really uncomfortable press conference from Phil Mickelson yesterday. And now could possibly be just really high drama on the golf course if you got Live Series guys paired with PGA Tour guys who clearly have come out on one side against the other, right? Justin Thomas is clearly a PGA Tour guy. Rory McIlroy, clearly a PGA Tour guy. McIlroy even crossing the line, I think, a little bit, taking the shot at Greg Norman, having won his 21st career tournament over the weekend and passed Greg Norman on the all-time list. Because that's where I think these guys get it wrong. I guess they have to view it as personal, but we all know the superstars aren't being threatened. Their net worth is ridiculous already, right? And that's I think the tough part for a lot of us to wrap our minds around. If Dustin Johnson was already worth $50 million, you get offered $150 million. Well, how much do you have to feel comfortable in the whole thing? And Rory McIlroy, I mean, Tiger Woods just became the third athlete to cross the $1 billion threshold. Michael Jordan, LeBron James, and Tiger. So Tiger Woods can come at it however he wants to come at it. And Phil Mickelson, I think, has made the second most amount of money in golf history. And so for him to go to the money, as opposed to what these other guys are saying, Tiger leading the way, it's about legacy and everything that the PGA Tour has represented and does represent and the whole thing. So it shouldn't surprise us that Phil bet on himself and thinks he plays by different rules, because in a lot of ways he does play by different rules. It's just the way he's gone about it has made it very difficult for me to pull for him. Right? If you're going to be that guy, be that guy. Well, I'm saying, no, this is, I don't think the PGA Tour is doing it the right way. And he said it in his own way yesterday, but this was how he got the reputation of the nickname of Fake Phil, I think, in a press conference, saying that he respects everything that the PGA Tour has been a part of, but then mentioning that he's done things behind the scenes and on the scenes to help the PGA Tour as well. Well, just say it like a human being, right? I think the PGA Tour is demanding more loyalty from me than they're giving to me. I think I could respond to that. I could be on Phil's side if he could be more honest in this situation, or if he'd show up the Masters, show up the PGA Championship, saying, I got to defend my crown. It was the greatest moment of my life winning this thing at 50 years old. Of course I'm going to come here. And I get it that a lot of people aren't happy with me. But this is my life. These are the decisions I've made, and we're moving forward now. You got to show up at the Masters. How do you not show up at the Masters? What, you're going to have an uncomfortable dinner at the Champions Dinner? You know people aren't going to like you? And then if Mark, you want to say that Greg Norman insult Rory first and McIlroy was just clapping back, come on. That doesn't excuse it to me. But this sets up the situation of the U.S. Open. I mean, unlike anything other that we've seen maybe in sports. We haven't seen a serious threat in my lifetime. I watched Herschel Walker and Doug Flutie play for the New Jersey Generals on ESPN back in the original USFL days. Steve Spurrier coaching the Tampa Bay Bandits. Was it Jim Kelly playing for Houston, or that whole thing? I thought it was relatively legit, and maybe it was to some extent, with the NFL not being nearly what it is today. So maybe it has happened in my lifetime, and I just wasn't aware of it as a less than 10-year-old kid back then, I think. But we haven't seen superstars plucked from their league and then paid to go play in another type series that is challenging the model, right? To be able to say that, well, I get to spend more time with my family, and the stress or the rigors of the commitments aren't as much here, so this is better for my family thing. That's something that all of us can understand, that all of us would side and say, hey, that's probably a good thing. But to not admit, at least Phil did touch on, well, the financial commitment is significant, kind of thing. Whew, what a crazy time. So I like to pull for Phil Mickelson on the golf course. I love a guy who is going to gamble with the way that he approaches the game of golf, right? If you have a much better percentage to play it safe and lay up, but you have a relatively small percentage, but the reward can justify the risk, we love those shots, don't we? Phil Mickelson has been that guy. And then the touch around the greens and the whole thing, just otherworldly. Been easy to pull for him because to see him pretty much dominated by Tiger Woods, but come to success in majors a little later in life, to see the 6-time runner-up deals at the U.S. Open and a couple of choke jobs, especially a wing foot. To see all that has made it relatively easy in my life to pull for Phil Mickelson. If he's on the leaderboard, I'm a fan. I'm going to watch. I'm probably going to pull for him. but I don't think I can do that anymore. Not with where he has put himself, how he's put himself. Dustin Johnson's not there to me. He came out, was the first guy really saying, yep, I'm going. Opportunity's too good to turn down. Maybe it's because he's from the state of South Carolina. Maybe it's just his personality. I'm like, yeah, I get that. Makes sense. Good for you. Go do it. Maybe it's the having some competition in the PGA Tour, changing the format. Why not? Try something different. Let's see it. Or maybe it's just the way that Dustin Johnson plays the game that is undeniably attractive for those of us who can't hit the ball like he hits it. Just I shake my head so often when I watch him play. And it's not just him now. It's McIlroy smashing it all over the place as well. But then to see how almost unemotionally Dustin handles disappointment too, that is another thing that makes me shake my head and almost like I don't understand, and yet I'm still kind of oddly respect it. Good for you. You can shake it off like that. Where are the those emotions? Are they not connected? It's all part of me having been able to pull for him, and now pulling for. Now I find myself pulling for some really interesting pairings going into the weekend because we didn't get them. We saw them announced there for Thursday. There's some good groups out there, but nothing overwhelmingly notable. I'm not running them up on the ticker for you today. But that's what these majors can't control, right? How these guys go through the first couple of days and then get paired with their scores on Saturday and Sunday. Rory with anybody from the Live Series would be fantastic. Justin Thomas, anybody with the Live Series would be fantastic. Any one of those guys in contention, I think, would be fantastic. For golf overall, for the drama, for all this stuff that's been going back and forth. Also to see the reality of the sentiment that Justin Thomas tried to express the other day, like, hey, I don't hate Dustin Johnson because he made this decision. I disagree with it, but it doesn't make me dislike him. And where we are in our world these days on social media, especially, that if you express a opinion different than your own, then you're just automatically opposed to the other person completely. And that's the false construct that social media portrays out there, or maybe that we fall in the trap of believing if we see it on social media. Maybe we're getting better at that. I hope we are. And I'm hopeful. Maybe I'm that naive to think that golf might be able to help it. Maybe having Rory McIlroy and Dustin Johnson sharing a laugh or two on the golf course, even though they clearly have come to major decisions in their lives from different ways and are moving forward in those ways. And it's a lot easier for one in Rory to play the good card, right? On the side of good, which I think is way overly simplified. That just to stick on the PGA Tour now is the red, white, and blue patriotic. You are choosing good over evil. And then on the other side too, I understand it's tough to see Saudi Arabian back tour and listen to that sports washing argument and know the massive money that it took for them to get guys over there, to hear Greg Norman even talk about it and promote the series and the whole thing. It's tough not to feel like that is the villain in this thing, and especially the way the PGA Tour is playing it. But it's not that black and white to me. And certainly these guys, I don't see them as just good and evil and good guys and bad guys like the old wrestling days. But it will be really easy to see that on the golf course. But I'm hopeful we'll get to see a pairing, the final pairing on Sunday, one of each. That would be fantastic. I think the odds are against that with the way that the guys on the PGA Tour like Justin Thomas and Tony Finau last week, just the way they're playing, where they are in their careers, and then where the guys on the Live Series are in their careers, more towards the back end, maybe outside of Dustin Johnson. But how the crowd reacts up in Boston this weekend too. What kind of moments we get, I think is going to be really fascinating, because those guys are human, man. You're getting booed, you're getting jabs thrown out you, shots taken. It's going to happen to some degree. How much it happens and then how they react to it, and in golf, going to be really odd, because that is a sport. First time I ever went to a pro golf event, I think, was either in Winston-Salem they had a pro-am event going on. My grandfather, I think, might have taken me. I think it was an LPGA deal. And then they had the Greater Greensboro Open as I was growing up. Went to that maybe a time or two, middle school, high school. But just how close you can get to these guys that you've been seeing on TV. It's crazy. Golf is the craziest. You can get the closest while they're playing, while they're in competition, than, to me, any other sport. I guess if you're lucky enough to get on the front row in a basketball game, you can be right there, and you could have watched the Warriors, mainly because of Andrew Wiggins last night, take the 3-2 series lead in the NBA Finals. And the classic thing to come out of last night, especially from a social media standpoint, is the poor guy trying to give the double high five to the woman beside him. I assume was his wife that they were excited about as Warrior fans. Just the clap, 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 high fives. Oh, if you guys haven't seen that on social media, man, check that out. That's going to be around forever. A lot more than any play that happened last night, I think. But in golf, you're so close to the action. And it makes me feel better to see guys hit bad shots or miss putts in real life that I certainly I'd do way more frequently than they would ever do. But just to know that it's a hard game for everybody, even the best in the world. And then to see guys hit shots that just are completely out of my realm of understanding how the ball even started to go in that direction, much less finished exactly where they wanted the whole thing. That's a part of it too. But Phil Mickelson will be affected negatively by the crowd this week at the U.S. Open in Boston. But it might also come back around, right? He mentioned that it's just the energy that fans bring, he appreciates, and they kind of have the right to express themselves how they want to, the clear PR approach. And Mark says, I saw that dude live, felt my soul leave my body for just a little bit for him. He's talking about the high five guy in the NBA Finals. You got to make sure the person you try to give a high five to is at least looking in your direction, though. Yeah, but sometimes as you're rising up to give the five, they are looking in your direction. They don't see you rising up or think maybe you're doing it to clap, and then they turn and you're already committed. He was already committed. It was maybe the reaction after that. Like, then you just got to kind of make fun of yourself. But he just went on with his clapping, I think, and just plowed right through it. Love it. I mean, just a pure moment caught by the ABC cutaway cameras last night in the NBA Finals that will live on forever on social media in the GIFs or the GIFs, depending where you're from. But I've come to the conclusion that it's going to be difficult to pull for Phil Mickelson. Maybe I will kind of come back around to it and pull for him from a pity standpoint. But just the body language. It's always been a strange look in his eye, I feel like, that has stood out to me with Phil Mickelson. Like, I don't, how some people just do that. They strike you that way. Like, I don't know what's going on behind that look, man. But it's not what I consider to be a normal look or one that puts me at ease at all. It goes the other way, actually. I'm trying to figure you out. That's kind of how I've always seen Phil Mickelson, maybe except for those moments on the golf course where he is clearly doing what he's meant to do or what he is comfortable doing. Like, yeah, it's obvious. Like, you being able to shape that shot or hit that flop shot or make that putt or whatever. But then afterwards, I think maybe it's a processing thing that he's doing at a different level than some other people are doing. I don't know. I don't know what it is, but that look now looks as obvious and uncomfortable as it ever has. Just total, maybe it's an on guard kind of thing. The guard is just all the way up. Maybe Maybe that's the feeling that I get from a lot of people. I had that feeling just walking past someone yesterday in a parking lot. It was just the two of us. There was no other people anywhere close. And so I went to do the, hey, I'm acknowledging you as a person kind of thing, and tried to be friendly and smile, and just got nothing from that person. It was like a diverted glance, like she didn't even trust that I was on the same planet or should be on the same planet near her space at the same time, and the whole thing. That's kind of what I'm getting from Phil Mickelson these days in Phil's world. Like any question that comes his way, I feel like he's just waiting for the absolute worst question, knowing that he doesn't have a whole lot of options to go to that will make him come off as the guy he wants to come, the likable guy he wants to come off as. So what happens on the course in the next few days going to be fantastic at the U.S. Open. I think we'll get a more golf friendly or golf centric, that's probably the way to look at it, breakdown from Meredith Taylor, former Gamecock golfer who plays golf at a high level and understands the game in a much different way than I do. Probably do that tomorrow. Who knows where else we'll go tomorrow. Probably get a more football specific guest going tomorrow. I know we have Brenton Burson, the former Carolina Panther, on tap for Thursday. Interested to connect with him, and especially now that he is running one of those daily fantasy sites out there. Outlast is the name of it. OutlastDFS.com, I think, is where you can go to check it out. But South Carolina has specific laws kind of against all of that stuff. North Carolina, just over the border, does not. And so he's kind of in that world, along with being a former Carolina Panther and everything that entails these days. Saw the Baker Mayfield story kind of continuing on today. More details coming from Joe Person, who works for The Athletic. It's been on this show before, known Joe for a long time, mentioning that Carolina is still very interested in Baker Mayfield, but they want Cleveland to pay more of that contract. I don't think Cleveland's in a position to get rid of Baker Mayfield at this point. With the Deshaun Watson situation continuing to evolve and more lawsuits being added, I think it's getting up to 26, or the reports are that it will be at 26 civil suits soon. I think that thing has not gone. I think it's very safe to say it hadn't gone how the Cleveland organization thought it would, where I think they thought it would be resolved by now or before the season started. It doesn't seem like that is anywhere close to happening right now. And things have only gotten worse, I think, for Deshaun Watson, with more and more details having come out with the non-disclosure agreements and the whole thing. So I'll be shocked if the Carolina Panthers are going to get Baker Mayfield at all, but especially if they can do it to the level where they get some cooperation with Cleveland paying him. I don't see that as highly likely right now. Trying to analyze the situation both teams are in. And I don't even know if Panthers fans would want Baker Mayfield that much to begin with. You already got one guy who didn't get it done as a high draft pick with the Jets and Sam Darnold. Now you're going to get another guy that the Cleveland Browns have given up on in Baker Mayfield. I don't know if I see that happening, or seeing that making it. To me, that would just be a Sam Darnold 2.0 situation. But to quickly recap the program, SEC West, half of the College World Series after Auburn punched its ticket last night at Oregon State. And then don't forget Texas and Oklahoma also involved and coming to the SEC soon. So that would be 6 out of 8. Landon Powell saying it's the Gamecocks or nothing else from his coaching future perspective, that North Greenville is a great spot. He'd love to be the coach of the University of South Carolina one day. Has always thought that, being a proud alum, but thinks that also Mark Kingston can be the guy to help get the program back to where it needs to be. College World Series, by the way, starts at 2 o'clock this Friday. Jonah Bride, the former Gamecock, set to make his major league debut tonight at Fenway Park, playing third base for the Oakland A's. Has also helped work his way up in the organization by catching. Then we got the uncomfortable U.S. Opens at the start in a couple of days as well. You know, June is a slow sports month traditionally. It has not been a slow week at all. You had Gamecock football recruiting news over the weekend as well, with 4 commits announced from Shane Beamer, or at least put out there on social media by Shane Beamer. 3 known, I think still 1 not gone public by putting a name with that commitment. So we'll continue to keep an eye on that for you. We really appreciate you tuning in today on the Tuesday edition of Tim Hill UFA. Streaming live every day, 10 a.m. to noon. YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, however you want to catch us. That's the video portion, the audio portion on Podbean Live, and then goes out on the podcast platforms soon after we wrap things up every day at noon. However you want to catch us there, Apple, Spotify, Google, all over the place on the podcast as well. And then you can always go to timhillufa.com on the website for more information. Appreciate all the participation today. Mark ending us with a happy Tuesday, everybody. York, RL, Roger, Troy, Ryan, all you guys. Really appreciate you joining us and being a part of the show. Talk to you tomorrow at 10.